Has science removed the need for the God superstition? You know, that's a popular concept nowadays, but it's not only popular today. About 200 years ago, in Napoleon's court, that he had a scholar by the name of Laplace, and he had worked out some mathematical formulas about the anomalies in the orbits of Jupiter and Saturn. And so when Napoleon asked him about that, he says, well, where does God fit into these equations? And Laplace said this. He says, I have no need for that hypothesis. And so let's just fast forward the tape a couple hundred years, and with the great scientific advancements that we have made over the last couple centuries, is that more and more people are confident that science will get to the place where it will be able to deliver to us all the knowledge that's possible to know. Well, we're going to be focusing on that idea in this particular episode of 5 Good Reasons Why God Exists. I'm Kerry Decker, your host. We'll be right back. My guest today with me is Chris Gonzalez. He is the Reasonable Faith Chapter Director in Anchorage, Alaska. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hey, tell me a little bit what got you interested in Reasonable Faith yourself.
I remember about in the year 2011, I was reading and seeing things in the media where people were making accusations against Christianity.
Yeah.
And I knew that they weren't true, but I wasn't able to give a sufficient response, an academic response.
Yeah.
And I started searching, and I started looking at websites, and I eventually found Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible Answer Man,
Yeah, okay.
and then started wanting more, and then that led me to Reasonable Faith, and I was hooked. I loved being able to study and read and just learn from every facet of academia that there was more and better proof for God.
There you go. Well, that's exciting, and I'm grateful that we have this opportunity to visit a little bit about this important question of has science removed the need for the God superstition? So what's your answer? I kind of suspect I know what you're going to say.
Really, no. To put it succinctly, it's a huge question, but no, it has not removed the need for the God hypothesis. The question and the answer, though, they really represent just two tips of a massive iceberg of a question, and you'd have to break it down into what do the terms mean? What do we mean by science, and what do we mean by the God superstition or hypothesis?
Yeah, well, break it down for me. Give me some definitions.
Sure. Well, the word science has really come to take on a meaning that is greater than it ever intended. And it comes from its Latin root, as many of our words do in the English language, scientia or sciri. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But in essence, it means to know.
Don't worry, because I always mangle the words. So.
Yeah, it would have been better just to show the word, but in essence, it just means knowledge, and that was the original intent of the Latin. Now, there is a bit of a more modern definition we could look at as well.
And what would that be?
Well, the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and I'll read it here, says that science is a few different definitions, but one would be the state of knowing. So knowledge as distinguished from ignorance or misunderstanding. And then there's some sub-definitions that we're also familiar with. So you might look at systemized knowledge from one study of a certain area like biology or theology or a sport or a technique. So we might say, sports science and nutritional science. And then there are a third definition about information obtained through what is known now as the scientific method.
Okay.
And there's a few other things that are loose, like it's kind of an art and a science, the science of martial arts.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
Or the science of baking. There's some art in there, but really, in the end, it's just a body of knowledge.
Okay, a body of knowledge. And so when you're talking about these definitions, you gave us a little bit of a definition on science. Anything else to say on that, or how about the whole God hypothesis thing?
Well, I think that's the best next place to look. And to be fair, I want to not only look at it from the Christian perspective, but look at it from an academic perspective and understand that there are some folks who are not Christians who are going to be looking at it. And if we want to have a opposite side of the spectrum for those who are not Christians, I think Richard Dawkins would certainly be within that realm.
Sure.
In his book, The God Delusion, he gave a definition, and I'll read it here. It said, "There exists a superhuman, supernatural intelligence who deliberately designed and created the universe and everything in it, including us." And that's how he defines what the God hypothesis represents.
Okay.
And as a Christian, I would agree.
Yeah,
yes, that is what the God hypothesis.
Yeah, it seems reasonable, So we talked about these definitions here. Is that why are these perceptions about science and faith, or the God hypothesis, why do they seem to be at odds, and why do people kind of like to bring that up as a reason why they have rejected belief in God?
Sure. Well, because now that, like I said earlier, science has taken on a different meaning. And we'll talk a little bit about scientism, and that is a popular topic where people are starting to realize that there is a belief in science as if it has its own power or ability to explain things. And Frank Turek says it best that science doesn't say anything, scientists do.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about this concept of scientism. What's it all about?
Well, within scientism, there are two kind of views: strong scientism and weak scientism. So scientism is the view that science is the very standard of truth and rationality. Yeah. So if something doesn't align with currently well-established scientific beliefs, and then it's not within the range of studies appropriate for scientific investigation, or it's not, you can't use what's called the scientific methodology, which we'll learn later isn't one clear and clean thing.
Yeah.
If it's not within that, people say it's not worth studying, it's not possible to know, it's good for you to believe in, but they would equate it to something like fairies or leprechauns, something that's just in the realm of disbelief.
Yeah.
And there are strong scientist believers. I don't mean scientist as in the person, but there are people who hold to scientism in a strong way.
As a philosophy, then, right? The scientism as a philosophy. Yeah.
That's right. And then there'd be people who hold to more of a weak scientism, where they say you can have your faith, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it could never be really known. And I think that's where you see people come to a conclusion that Buddhism, Christianity, whatever works for you, will never know the truth.
Yeah.
That's all in the realm of just belief.
Yeah.
And the only thing we can know is through science, and that's really unfortunate because I don't understand, like I said earlier, the academic truth of the Christian faith.
Yeah. When you're talking about the strong and weak scientism, is that what are some of the problems? What are some of the reasons why we probably should challenge that point of view?
Well, I think there's two reasons. One, scientists, they rely on philosophical foundations in order to be able to conduct science that either they don't realize or they're not willing to admit.
Yeah.
Two, there are many things that science can't prove. And three, if we move to only believing in things that science can prove, we lose a lot of the things that we value most in society.
Yeah.
Beauty, love, morality, if we dial those things only down to what science can prove, that would leave us with very little.
Yeah, yeah. When we're talking about that philosophy upon which science rests, there's a whole lot of things that we just kind of take for granted, like mathematics is not provable by science, and yet scientists need mathematics to do science. Any other examples come to your mind about some of the philosophies or the assumptions upon which science rests?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is, say, the laws of logic. That's where everything is really based upon. Our whole idea of rational thought comes from the laws of logic, and there's three of them that I'd like to focus on. They sound complicated, but when you think about it, there's something we use every day. The first would be the law of identity, and often it's represented as P is P or A is A, and that simply means that something is what it is, and it's not something else, and it's not the opposite of what we're claiming it to be. So I started earlier by talking about definitions, but if I said that the bucket is wet, the bucket is filled with water.
Yeah.
So once we determine what water is, what the bucket is, and filled means, then if I look in that bucket and it's completely dry, my statement is wrong.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right? But I can't prove that method of thought is through science. It's what we're basing our scientific analysis on.
Yeah, gotcha.
So that's the first one, the law of identity.
Okay.
The other one is the law of non-contradiction.
Yeah.
And when I say if I say it is raining, it cannot be both true and false in the same way at the same time.
Gotcha.
So if you go outside and it's snowing, well, let's define what rain is. Somebody might say, well, did you mean precipitating? And I said, no, I meant rain, as in water falling from the sky, not snow. So now we have to redefine it, and we look outside, and it's either raining or not raining. It can't be both.
Yeah. Yeah. So you say there's three of these.
The third is there's three. Then the third is the law of the excluded middle, and that really means it can't be half raining. It either is raining or it's not raining.
Okay.
And there can't be both a God and not a God that acts in our lives. And I think a lot of these questions are great for theology because there can't be both a God and not a God. There can't be both one God and many gods.
Gotcha. For
the law of the excluded middle. And there can't be a God who was eternal and all-powerful and who is also, but then another God who is also the eternal, all-powerful God. These things would all be in conflict. But there's no scientific method or test that we could use to make sense of these. It's all within the realm of logic and philosophy. And
there you go. Yeah.
Once we look at that immediately destroys the claim that scientism is the only way to answer and find truth.
Yeah, and I like that concept that you shared a little bit earlier of the idea of science resting upon certain assumptions and philosophies, because not only is it the law of logic, but even there's a certain aesthetics to science where they talk about Occam's razor, morality to science, where that you should be honest in reporting your findings, even the mere concept that the external world is really out there and it's just not a fantasy of my own mind is not something that I can prove by science, but it nevertheless is a philosophy that scientists embark upon in order to do science. So you talked about these different areas of knowledge and understanding that are not scientific in nature, that are necessary for us to do science. And so that's one of the reasons why that you would reject scientism, if I'm understanding you correctly. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so it also seems to me that the whole claim that science is the only way to know truth is not something that can be proven scientifically. It's a philosophical statement, so it kind of like refutes itself, right?
That's a great point. That's a great point. That's something that people like Dr. Moreland, Dr. J.P. Moreland has presented so well.
Yeah.
Where he has other scientists come to him and say, "Well, these are the reasons I believe that science is the only thing that we should believe in." And he says, "Well, can you prove that scientifically?"
Yeah.
And you can't.
Yeah. So you were talking about the scientific method and how it delivers to us, as quote unquote sure knowledge. What is the scientific method?
Well, a lot of people say that the scientific method is what we learned in school.
Yeah.
And we learned a way of thinking, really. And it was taught to us because we needed to have an idea of how to come to rational thought. And there are terms like inductivism and deductivism, where we either come from a generalization and we then make detailed claims, or we have detailed claims and we come then to a generalization. Really what we learned, though, was something called the hypothetico-deductive method, and that's a mouthful for anyone.
Yeah.
But it means, students, I want you to learn to ask a question,
Yeah.
propose an idea about what might happen, test that idea, and then come to a conclusion and repeat that process.
Yeah.
And that's really what people think about when they think about the scientific method. But there's more to it than that.
Okay. Yeah. Like what?
Well, one of the things is the scientific method, as many people understand and often use, is that we can do tests and repeat those tests and then come to a conclusion that every time I do these tests with these variables, this will occur, and so now I have an answer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people aren't realizing about many of the things that they are making claims on are things that we could never repeat. For instance, the origin of the universe.
Okay.
Scientists have made many claims about how the universe came to be, but they could certainly never repeat the origin of the universe.
Okay. Yeah.
Or things that happen in history, like the extinction of the dinosaurs. That's something that we can't repeat. And so now we're looking into history, and we're conducting more of a forensic science. And we're having to make claims on knowledge about something that we both didn't observe and we cannot repeat. And so within the common definition of the scientific method, we're already outside of those bounds. So now we must open up the scientific method to include something more eclectic or something more general that has combined all the ways that we come to find information. And Dr. Moreland has written papers and a book on that about the 7 different aspects, which we don't have to go over them, each of them, but it's good to know that there's more than one way to come to truth.
Yeah. Good. You were talking about kind of like the things that science can't tell us, and that and the origin of the universe, the the origin of consciousness. Anything else that would make your list?
Well, I think one of the things is that the fundamental laws of nature that we find, science can't explain why they are the way they are. When science tells us that this is how gravity functions, it can't explain why gravity functions that way. Or when science explains that this is the second law of thermodynamics, which we use as Christians and science, unbelievers as well, will say points to an origin of the Big Bang or a finite past. We don't know why it is that way. We can simply see that it is that way. And another one, you said consciousness, fine-tuning. Why is the universe fine-tuned? Why are all the dials on this long radio set of buttons, why are they all fine-tuned for not just life to exist, but for the universe to exist at all? It's really amazing once you find out how many things had to work and be set just the way they are
Yeah.
in order for us to live.
Yeah. How about the whole issue of morality? I mean,
That's an excellent question,
yeah.
and probably one of the strongest arguments I think for God is the argument of objective moral values. I remember giving a presentation one time, and I used a question that Dr. Frank Turek uses very often, but he said, is it wrong at all times, in all places, to torture babies for fun?
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't seen anyone yet be willing to say that that is fine or okay, or it's doesn't really matter as a question, because it's written on our hearts, as we see in the Bible, that there is right and wrong, and we know what is right and wrong.
Yeah.
And for those who don't agree or see that that's right and wrong, we say that there's something broken about them. We talk about sociopaths, and people are called homicidal maniacs, and they're termed as something wrong with them if they act upon those things. But without an objective lawgiver, without God, with only science, then we're all just carbon-based accidents, and what would make anything special?
Yeah, computers made of meat. So.
Exactly, yeah. A computer meat sack, I think one person put it. But
I've heard
I've
heard about Sam Harris saying that we can that science can do this. That's the claim, and that that we'll be able to kind of like figure out human flourishing. But the thing that really bothers me about that, to tell you the truth, is that when it comes to kind of saying, oh yeah, humans can figure this out, then I'm wondering who gets to choose on that, because somebody's going to say, yeah, this is exactly the right way to do it, and how and what course to take. And I kind of suspect that if Adolf Hitler was around, he would say, yeah, the very best thing for human flourishing is to extinguish all the Jews, and if he had the power, he would do that. And so when we get to these kind of human-centric methods of trying to establish morality, and that when you really start to examine those a little bit closer, it all breaks down. And so I agree with you. There has to be some sort of system that is not invented by man, but to which humans are accountable and societies are accountable in order for us to have moral values and truths. Well, hey, we digress a little bit on that. So, can Christians be good scientists? What's your opinion?
Absolutely, Christians can be good scientists.
Yeah.
I was reviewing actually one of the videos you had produced earlier, and it goes through some of the Christians who in the past have done excellent science. Francis Bacon, Leibniz, and the conclusions that they came to were based upon their belief in Christian faith, that God had created a world that was understandable and systematic and reliable.
Yeah.
And for lack of a better term, just made sense. And they expected that things would act in a way that we could understand and learn about. And so our ideas about how the planets work, how life works, how light refracts even, that all stemmed from our understanding and seeking of God creating a universe which is logical.
Exactly. And it's not just an old-fashioned idea that some scientists back, like Newton and some of those guys held, and Galileo, but who, by the way, remained a Christian his whole life, is that.
Right.
But also modern-day scientists who are extremely gifted in their field. Francis Collins, I believe. I have a friend
Stephen
who's
Meyer,
actually.
Dembski.
You say what now?
Stephen Meyer, Dr. Stephen Meyer.
Oh yeah.
Their work currently on intelligent design, which I've come to recently read quite a bit more on, and it doesn't just have to do with evolution versus creation debate. Intelligent design says that there is something that has made this world, and by world I mean universe, everything that we have
Yeah.
come to know with space, time, and matter in such a way that it shows its design. It shows that
Yeah.
there is a watchmaker.
Yeah, exactly. So, we talked a little bit about the philosophical assumptions behind science. We talked about being Christians. If Christians could be good science, scientists. I just got to bring this up is that when I was in college, many years ago, that there was a kid. There was a kid in one of our math classes, and he raised his hand and he said, he asked the professor, he says, "Do you think that we'll get to the place where science or math," and I think in that class, I can't remember for sure, but where we'll be able to explain it all with science? What would you say to that?
No, no, I don't think we'll ever get to a place where we will be able to explain it all. But part of that means that doesn't mean we won't get to a place where we will be able to understand a significant amount more. But like I said earlier, when we talk about what science does, science explains how things work, but it can't explain fully why things are that way.
Yeah,
Dr. Craig
exactly.
gave an example. Excuse me. Dr. Craig gave an example about walking into the kitchen and seeing that the tea kettle was steaming. And he said to his wife, "Why is the tea kettle steaming?" Now, if she responded, "Well, because of thermoconduction through a metal plate, the heat has activated the molecules of the water and excited them to a point where they're rapidly expanding through the tiny hole and it's making a whistle."
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
said, "No, no, I mean, why?" And she said, "Well, I wanted some tea." There are two reasons
Yeah.
as to why things are the way they are. And we can see how God interacts with the world in two different ways. When we ask, why did God part the Red Sea to allow Moses and them to escape? Well, we can maybe figure out how. Maybe we could find that there was a wind tunneling effect, or we could find out how God interacted
Yeah.
through the natural world. But when we say we're going to explain everything, to explain how a transcendent God interacts with the natural world, which Alvin Plantinga, one of the greatest modern philosophers, is working on in some of his books. But when we look to explain that, science can't do that unless we
Yeah.
allow science to mean a body of knowledge which allows theology to be part of it.
Yeah.
And we can grow in our understanding, but no, we'll never be able to explain everything solely through science as that young man probably defined it.
Yeah, you know, he obviously he's a young man and probably a young unmarried man, because when you get married, you kind of get to that place where you say, "There's no scientific explanation of why my wife loves me," you know.
Yes.
And
Yes, it's another miracle.
yes, it's another miracle. There you go. So, hey, Chris, we're almost out of time here, and I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts for us on this topic.
I'd really like to conclude by just summarizing what we were talking about. In the end, science doesn't tell us anything, but science is one way by which we can gather knowledge about how things work and interact. But it'll never tell us everything. The knowledge gained through the different areas of scientific study and through obtaining knowledge, through observation and consideration, should consider our Christian faith. That's not something that Christians should shy away from.
Yeah.
And science will never remove the need for God. In fact, science continues to prove the need for a God, for a all-powerful, omniscient being who set this world in a path that will allow us to flourish and survive. And if folks are looking for reading on this topic, Dr. Moreland, J.P. Moreland, and Alvin Plantinga have written some excellent books, which I heavily used in preparation for this and have as part of my library and would recommend to them.
Great. Hey, Chris, thank you so much for coming to us all the way from Anchorage, Alaska, where I understand it's like 3 degrees below zero today. Is that correct?
Yes, a balmy 3 degrees below.
And I also understand that you're going to go camping with your son this week. Is that right?
Yes, with about 3 sleeping bags and 2 bags of blankets, but we're going to go camping.
Hey, man, you're the man. There's no question about it. Hey, it's been a pure delight visiting with you here today, Chris. I really appreciate that. And there's plenty of other great content here on 5 good reasons why God exists. I invite you to keep watching and explore each and every episode that comes up. That's it for now. I'll see you next time.